What happens when a joke goes too far and the one you thought was powerless turns the tables? I never expected to be handed official court papers at my own front door. Papers that changed my life and made me realize my harmless birthday prank wasn't so harmless after all. The restaurant buzzed with conversation as I adjusted my red dress and checked my reflection in my phone camera. Tonight was Simon's 36th birthday, and I had plans to make it memorable. Not just for him, but for his uptight parents, who always looked at me like I was something they'd scraped off their shoe. "Eluned, you look beautiful," Simon said, straightening his tie nervously. He always got anxious around his parents, which honestly annoyed me. At 34, I wasn't about to tiptoe around anyone, especially not June and Walter Ellis. "Thanks, babe," I replied, barely glancing at him. I was too busy watching his parents across the restaurant. June sat ramrod straight in her navy blazer, her grey hair pulled into that same boring bun she'd worn for probably 20 years. Walter fidgeted with his glasses, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. My sister Tessa leaned over from her seat. "You're plotting something, aren't you? I can see that look in your eyes." "Just planning to liven things up," I whispered back with a grin. "Someone needs to show these people how to have fun." The waiter appeared with our appetizers, and I saw my opening. Standing up slightly, I raised my wine glass. I'd like to make a toast to the birthday boy and his wonderful family. Everyone looked up expectantly. Simon's face showed a mix of hope and terror. He knew me well enough to be worried. "To Simon, who works so hard at his accounting firm that he's forgotten what fun looks like." I laughed, and a few people chuckled nervously. "And to June and Walter, who raised such a responsible son. June, I just love how you always have something helpful to say about everything I do. Like last week when you suggested I might want to dress more appropriately for church, because apparently showing my shoulders is going to send everyone straight to hell." The table went quiet. June's face flushed red, and Walter stared down at his plate. Simon grabbed my wrist gently. "Eluned, maybe we should—" "Oh, come on, Simon. Your mum loves giving advice, don't you, June? Like when you told me I should learn to cook because the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. I guess you missed the memo that we're not living in 1950 anymore." A few of my co-workers laughed uncomfortably. My friend Rachel from marketing was recording on her phone, probably for her Instagram story. Perfect. "And Walter," I continued, warming up now, "I just adore how you pretend to read the newspaper whenever I try to have a conversation. It's like you've perfected the art of ignoring people you don't approve of." "Eluned, please," Simon said quietly, his voice strained. But I was on a roll. The wine had loosened my tongue, and honestly, these people had it coming. You know what the best part is? They think they're so much better than everyone else, but June hasn't worked a day since 1985, and Walter spent 40 years pushing papers at an engineering firm. Real impressive stuff. June's eyes filled with tears, and she stood abruptly. "Excuse me," she whispered, heading toward the bathroom. Walter followed her without a word, leaving Simon staring at me in horror. "What?" I said, sitting back down. "I was just having fun. They need to learn to take a joke." Our 7-year-old daughter Mila tugged on my sleeve. "Mummy, why is Grandma crying?" "She's just being dramatic, sweetie," I said, taking another sip of wine. Simon didn't speak to me for the rest of dinner. The car ride home was silent except for Mila's chatter about her upcoming school project. Simon gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, and I could practically feel the anger radiating off him. "You're being ridiculous," I finally said as we pulled into our driveway. "It was just a joke. Your parents are way too sensitive." Simon turned off the engine and sat there for a moment. "A joke? Eluned, you humiliated them in front of everyone." My mother was crying. "Oh, please. June cries when she burns toast. She'll get over it." "Will she? Because she just texted me saying they're going home tonight instead of staying for the weekend like we planned." I felt a tiny pang of guilt, but pushed it away. "Good. Maybe now we can actually enjoy ourselves without them judging everything I do. Simon carried a sleeping Mila inside while I checked my phone. Rachel had already posted the video on Instagram with laughing emojis. At least someone appreciated my sense of humor. "Eluned, we need to talk," Simon said after putting Mila to bed. "Look, I'm sorry your parents can't take a joke, but that's not my problem. They've been passive-aggressive toward me since day one. They've never been anything but polite to you." "Polite?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call it when your mother constantly criticizes how I dress, how I parent, how I keep house? When your father acts like I'm invisible?" Simon sat down heavily on our couch, looking exhausted. "They're traditional people, Eluned. They don't mean any harm. Traditional is just code for judgmental, and I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not just to make them comfortable. So instead, you decided to tear them down in public. I decided to stand up for myself for once." Simon shook his head and grabbed a pillow from the couch. "I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight." "Fine by me," I called after him, but inside I felt unsettled. Simon rarely got this angry with me, and when he did, he usually got over it quickly. An hour later, I found myself in my car, driving aimlessly through town. I needed to talk to someone who would understand, someone who wouldn't make me feel like the villain in this situation. I pulled into the parking lot of Brew and Bean, the coffee shop where Dane worked the late shift. Through the window, I could see him wiping down tables, his sandy hair falling across his forehead in that way that made my stomach flutter. I texted him, "Are you busy? Need to talk." He looked up from his phone and smiled when he saw my car. 5 minutes later, he was sliding into my passenger seat, bringing the smell of coffee and his cologne with him. "Rough night?" he asked, studying my face in the dim light. "You could say that. Simon's family drama, as usual." "Want to talk about it?" I told him about the dinner, expecting sympathy, but Dane just listened without much reaction. "What?" I asked when I finished. "Nothing. It's just, they're his parents, you know. Maybe there was a better way to handle it." "Not you too," I groaned. "I thought you of all people would understand." "I do understand. You're frustrated and you wanted to make a point. But maybe next time you could try talking to Simon privately first." I stared at him. "Since when are you so concerned about Simon's feelings?" Dane shrugged. "I'm not. I'm concerned about yours. This kind of thing has a way of coming back to bite you." As I drove home an hour later, I noticed Tessa's car still in my driveway. She was sitting on my porch steps, and she didn't look happy. "Where were you?" she asked as I approached. "Just driving around, clearing my head." "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to check on you after tonight. That was intense. Everyone's being so dramatic. It was just a joke." Tessa stood up and followed me inside. "Eluned, I love you, but that wasn't just a joke. You really hurt those people. They've been hurting me for years with their snide comments and disapproving looks." "Have they? Or have you been interpreting politeness as hostility because you're looking for reasons to dislike them?" I turned to stare at my sister. "Whose side are you on here?" "Yours, always. But that doesn't mean I have to agree with everything you do. You have a good thing with Simon. Don't mess it up over your pride." After Tessa left, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Simon was in the guest room, and the house felt too quiet. Maybe I had gone a little overboard at dinner, but his parents really did need to lighten up. And if Simon couldn't see that, maybe that was his problem, not mine. The next morning, Simon was already gone when I woke up. He'd left coffee in the pot, and a note saying he'd taken Mila to school, but nothing else. No "good morning," no "have a good day." Just silence. At work, I threw myself into a new marketing campaign, trying to push the previous night out of my mind. But every time I checked my phone, I hoped for a text from Simon. Instead, I got one from my mother. "Tessa told me what happened. I'm sure Simon's parents deserved whatever you said. They've never appreciated you." "Leave it to Mum to take my side no matter what. Karen Marrow had never liked Simon, claiming he was too boring for me. She'd been thrilled when I started getting attention from other men, though she didn't know about Dane specifically. Around lunch, I decided to stop by Brew and Bean. Dane was working the day shift, and the place was nearly empty. "How are you feeling today?" he asked as he made my usual latte. Like everyone's overreacting to a harmless joke. "Is that really what you think it was?" I studied his face. "You're different today. Last night you seemed more understanding. I've been thinking about what you told me, about Simon, about his parents, about everything." He handed me my coffee and our fingers brushed. The familiar spark was there, but something else too. Something that looked almost like pity. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Maybe you should go home and talk to your husband, Eluned. Really talk to him." "I don't want to talk about Simon right now." "Then what do you want to talk about?" "Us, this, whatever this is between us." Dane glanced around the empty cafe and leaned closer. "What about us? You're married, you have a kid. I'm just the guy you come to when you need to feel better about yourself." His words stung because they held more truth than I wanted to admit. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? When's the last time you asked me about my life, my problems, my goals? This whole thing is about you feeling trapped and me being your escape route." Before I could respond, the bell above the door chimed, and Mrs. Henderson from down the street walked in. I quickly stepped back from the counter, my face burning. "Hello, Eluned, dear," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How's Simon doing? I heard you all had quite the celebration last night." Word travelled fast in our small town. "It was lovely, thank you." "I'm sure it was. Please give him my regards." I left without finishing my conversation with Dane, feeling more unsettled than ever. That evening, Simon came home late from work. He kissed Mila goodnight and helped her with her homework, but he barely acknowledged me. "How was your day?" I asked as he loaded the dishwasher. "Fine." "Simon, we need to talk about last night." "Do we? Because I've been thinking about it all day, and I'm not sure there's much to say." "What's that supposed to mean?" He turned to face me, and I was surprised by the coldness in his eyes. "It means I'm tired, Eluned. I'm tired of making excuses for you, tired of apologizing to people for your behavior, tired of pretending that what you did was okay. One joke at a birthday dinner, and suddenly I'm the worst person in the world." "It wasn't one joke. It's been building for months. The comments, the eye rolls, the way you talk about my family when they're not around. Last night was just the final straw." I felt panic rising in my chest. Simon had never talked to me like this before. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I need some time to think." "About what?" "About whether this is working anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You're talking about our marriage because of one dinner." "I'm talking about our marriage because my wife humiliated my parents in public and doesn't seem to think she did anything wrong." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, looking for signs that Simon was bluffing, that he was just trying to make a point. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized he'd been pulling away for weeks. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my recent messages. There were several from Dane that I'd deleted, but I remembered what they said. Sweet things, flirty things, things that made me feel desired and appreciated. At 2 a.m., I texted him, "Can't sleep. Thinking about you." He didn't respond until morning. "We should probably cool it for a while. You have bigger problems to deal with." Even Dane was abandoning me. The one person who made me feel alive and interesting was pulling away just when I needed him most. I spent the day at work, distracted and irritable. My boss, Jennifer, pulled me aside after I snapped at a coworker. "Everything okay, Eluned? You seem off today." "Just some family stuff. I'll be fine." "Take tomorrow off if you need to. Get your head straight." But I didn't want time off. I wanted to stay busy to avoid thinking about the mess my life was becoming. Instead, I threw myself into planning our department's monthly happy hour. determined to surround myself with people who appreciated my sense of humor. The happy hour was at Martini's, a trendy bar downtown where my co-workers and I often went to unwind. I'd invited everyone from the marketing department, plus a few friends from other areas of the company. Simon had declined to come, claiming he had work to catch up on. His loss, I told Rachel as we claimed a high-top table near the bar. I'm tired of him acting like I committed some unforgivable sin. What exactly did you say to his parents? Asked Mike from accounting. He'd heard bits and pieces of the story through office gossip. I just made a few jokes about how uptight they are. Nothing terrible, but they acted like I'd insulted their entire bloodline. What kind of jokes? Pressed Sarah from HR, and I could tell she was genuinely curious. I launched into a dramatic retelling of the birthday dinner, embellishing details and making June and Walter sound even more ridiculous than they actually were. By the time I finished, half the table was laughing. "Oh my God, you actually said that," Rachel gasped. "I would have died." Someone had to put them in their place. They've been passive-aggressively criticizing me for years. "Good for you," said Tom from sales. "I hate it when people think they're better than everyone else." But I noticed that Mike looked uncomfortable, and Sarah was frowning slightly. Jennifer, my boss, was listening, but not laughing along with the others. "I mean, they are Simon's parents," Mike said carefully. "Maybe they were just trying to be helpful." "Helpful?" I laughed. "Is it helpful to tell someone their parenting style is too permissive, or that their career isn't as important as their husband's? Because that's the kind of help I get from Eluned Ellis." "Still," Sarah said, "publicly embarrassing them seems a bit harsh." I felt my face flush. "Whose side are you on here?" "I'm not on anyone's side. I'm just saying that family dynamics are complicated, and maybe there was a better way to handle it." "You sound just like my husband," I snapped. "Everyone's so concerned about protecting their precious feelings, but no one cares about how they've been treating me." The conversation moved on to other topics, but I could tell the mood had shifted. Some people were still on my side, but others seemed to be reconsidering their initial reactions. An hour later, as I was returning from the bathroom, I spotted a familiar figure at the bar. Dane was there with a group of his friends, and when he saw me, he smiled and waved me over. "Hey, stranger," he said, giving me a hug that lasted a beat too long. "What are you doing here?" "Work happy hour. What about you?" "Just hanging out with some buddies. You look great, by the way." The attention felt good after the lukewarm reception from my co-workers. Dane introduced me to his friends, and I found myself flirting more openly than I should have. The wine had loosened my inhibitions, and I was enjoying the way Dane's eyes followed me as I talked and laughed. "So you're the famous Eluned," said one of his friends, a guy named Jake. "Dane's told us all about you." "All good things, I hope," I replied, shooting Dane a meaningful look. "Definitely. He says you're the most interesting woman he's ever met." I felt a thrill of satisfaction. Here was someone who appreciated me, who found me fascinating instead of embarrassing. When I returned to my co-worker's table, Rachel immediately pounced. "Who was that gorgeous guy you were talking to?" "Just a friend," I said, but I could tell she didn't buy it. "A friend who looks at you like he wants to devour you. Come on, spill." "It's complicated," I admitted, and suddenly I found myself telling Rachel everything. About how unappreciated I felt at home, about how Simon had changed, about how Dane made me feel alive again. "So you're having an affair?" Rachel asked, her eyes wide. "It's not really an affair. We're just friends who have feelings for each other." "Girl, that's definitely an affair. The physical stuff is just a technicality. Simon doesn't understand me anymore. All he cares about is work and keeping his parents happy. When's the last time he made me feel special?" "But you're married, you have a daughter." "I know that, but I can't help how I feel." Rachel looked conflicted, like she wanted to be supportive, but wasn't sure this was the right thing to support. The evening ended with me feeling more confused than ever. Part of me was thrilled by Dane's attention, and the validation from some of my coworkers. But another part of me felt hollow, like I was performing a role instead of living my life. When I got home, Simon was already asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching him in the dim light from the hallway. He looked peaceful, younger somehow, and I felt a pang of something that might have been regret. But then, I remembered how he'd dismissed my feelings about his parents, how he'd made me feel like the villain for standing up for myself. The regret faded, replaced by familiar resentment. I grabbed my phone and texted Dane. "Thanks for tonight. It was exactly what I needed." This time, he responded immediately. "Anytime. You deserve to be happy." I fell asleep with my phone in my hand, Dane's words echoing in my mind. The next morning, I woke up to find Simon already dressed and drinking coffee in the kitchen. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept well, but there was something different about his posture. More resolved, maybe. "Good morning," I said tentatively. "Morning." He didn't look up from his phone. "Simon, about last night. Where were you last night?" The question caught me off guard. "I told you, work happy hour at Martini's." "Until midnight?" I felt a chill run down my spine. We lost track of time. You know how these things go. Simon finally looked at me, and his expression was unreadable. "Do I?" "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. I have to get to work early today. Can you take Mila to school?" "Of course, but Simon—" "We'll talk later, Eluned. I promise." Something in his tone made me nervous, but I couldn't put my finger on what had changed. At work, I tried to focus on my projects, but I kept thinking about Simon's strange mood. Around lunch, Jennifer called me into her office. "Close the door, please," she said, and my stomach dropped. "Is everything okay?" "I wanted to talk to you about last night. Some of the things you shared at happy hour have me concerned." "What things?" "About your marriage, about this other man you mentioned. Eluned, I consider you a friend, but I also have to think about the company's reputation." "I don't understand." "Office gossip travels fast. If you're having marital problems, that's your business. But when you discuss your personal life in detail with coworkers, especially when it involves potential infidelity, it reflects poorly on all of us." I felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger. I was just venting to friends. "I know, and I understand the impulse. But you need to be more careful about what you share, and with whom. This is a small company, and people talk." "Are you firing me?" "Of course not. I'm just asking you to use better judgment going forward. Keep your personal life personal, especially while you're figuring things out at home." I left Jennifer's office feeling humiliated and angry. How dare people judge me for having feelings, for being human? I'd worked hard for this company, and now they were treating me like some kind of liability. I spent the rest of the day avoiding eye contact with my coworkers, wondering who had reported back to Jennifer and what exactly they'd said. When I got home, Simon was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a folder in front of him. He looked up when I walked in, and his expression was calm but serious. "Where's Mila?" I asked. "At my parents' house. I picked her up from school and took her over there." "Why?" "Because we need to have a conversation, and I didn't want her to overhear." Simon gestured for me to sit down across from him. The folder remained closed, but I could see papers inside it. "What's this about, Simon?" "It's about our marriage, about what's been happening, and about what happens next." "You're scaring me." "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to be honest with you, maybe for the first time in months." He opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. I could see credit card statements, phone records, and what looked like printed screenshots. "I know about Dane," he said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "I know about the coffee shop meetings, the late-night texts, the charges on your credit card. I know you were with him last night after your work event." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Simon, I can explain—" "Can you? Because I've been trying to understand this for weeks, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion." "What conclusion?" that my wife is having an affair and doesn't respect me enough to be honest about it. It's not an affair. We haven't done anything physical. Do you have feelings for him? I hesitated a moment too long. It's complicated. No, Eluned, it's really not. Either you want to be married to me or you don't. Either you're committed to this family or you're not. Of course I'm committed to our family. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're committed to doing whatever makes you feel good in the moment, regardless of how it affects Mila or me. I felt tears starting to form. You don't understand what it's been like for me. Your parents hate me. You're always working. I feel invisible in my own life. So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to humiliate my parents in public and start an emotional affair with another man. I tried to talk to you, but every time I brought up your parents, you dismissed my concerns. Because your concerns weren't reasonable, my parents have never been anything but polite to you. Maybe not warm, maybe not your best friends, but polite, and you turned that into some kind of persecution complex. That's not fair. What's not fair is what you did at my birthday dinner. What's not fair is you running to another man instead of working on our marriage. What's not fair is our daughter asking me why Mummy seems so sad all the time. The mention of Mila made my chest tight. She said that. She's 7, Eluned. She notices more than you think. Simon pulled out another sheet of paper, and I could see it was some kind of legal document. What is that? Papers from a lawyer. I've been getting advice about our options. You're divorcing me? The words came out as a whisper. I'm preparing for that possibility, because right now I don't see how we come back from this. Simon, please, I made mistakes, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling, we can... Can we? Because I've been thinking about what that would require, and I'm not sure you're capable of it. What do you mean? It would require you to take full responsibility for your choices without blaming me or my parents or anyone else. It would require you to cut off all contact with Dane. It would require you to rebuild trust that you've completely destroyed. Are you willing to do those things? I stared at him, feeling trapped. The idea of never seeing Dane again, of admitting I was completely wrong, of groveling to his parents, it all felt impossible. I need time to think, I said finally. Simon nodded and gathered up his papers. That's what I thought. You can think all you want, Eluned, but I'm done waiting for you to decide whether you want to be my wife or not. He stood up and headed toward the door. Where are you going? To get our daughter. She's sleeping here tonight, but starting tomorrow, she's going to stay with my parents for a few days while we figure this out. You can't take her away from me. I'm not taking her away. I'm protecting her from the chaos you've created. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about our future, let me know. After Simon left, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the empty folder. Everything was falling apart, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I could manipulate my way out of it. 3 days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and anxious phone calls. Mila was staying with Simon's parents, and despite my protests, Simon insisted it was temporary until we resolved things. I'd tried calling him dozens of times, but he only answered when it was about practical matters: Mila's school pickup, her doctor's appointment, her soccer practice. I'd also tried reaching out to Dane, but he'd made it clear that he was done being caught in the middle of my marriage drama. Figure out your life, Eluned, he'd said during our last phone call. I can't be your escape route anymore. Even Tessa was being distant. When I'd called her crying about Simon's ultimatum, she'd listened politely, but hadn't offered the unconditional support I was used to. Maybe he has a point, she'd said carefully. Maybe you do need to take a step back and think about what you really want. I want my family back. Do you? Or do you just want things to go back to the way they were, where you could do whatever you wanted without consequences? Now I was sitting in my empty house on a Friday evening, surrounded by the silence that had become my constant companion. I'd ordered Chinese takeout and opened a bottle of wine, trying to work up the courage to call Simon and tell him I was ready to do whatever it took to save our marriage. But before I could dial his number, I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Simon's sedan, and my heart leaped with hope. Maybe he'd come to his senses. Maybe he'd realized that breaking up our family over a few mistakes was an overreaction. Simon walked in without knocking, carrying a manila envelope and wearing an expression I'd never seen before. He looked professional, detached. "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual. "I was just thinking about calling you." "Were you? That's interesting timing." "Simon, I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days. And you're right, I made mistakes. I'm ready to work on things, to go to counseling, whatever you want." "Are you?" Something in his tone made me nervous. "Yes, absolutely. I know I hurt you and your parents, and I'm sorry. I'll apologize to them. I'll cut things off completely with Dane." "You'll cut things off with Dane?" "Yes, I already have, actually. I told him it was over, that I want to focus on my marriage." Simon nodded slowly. "That's good to hear. Really good." He sat down across from me at the kitchen table, the same spot where we'd had our confrontation 3 days earlier. But this time, he seemed calmer, more in control. "I have something for you," he said, sliding the envelope across the table. "What is it?" "Open it." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of papers. The first page made my blood run cold. Petition for dissolution of marriage. "Simon, what is this?" "Divorce papers. I'm filing on Monday." "But I just told you I want to work on things." "I know what you told me. The question is whether I believe you." He reached across the table and pulled out a second envelope I hadn't noticed. From it, he extracted printed screenshots, credit card statements, and what looked like text message logs. "These are from last night, Eluned." I looked at the papers, and my heart sank. They were screenshots of text messages between me and Dane from the previous evening, messages I'd sent after drinking too much wine and feeling sorry for myself. "I can explain. Can you? Because these messages don't sound like someone who's cut things off completely. They sound like someone who's angry that her boyfriend won't comfort her during her divorce." I stared at the evidence in front of me, remembering the wine-fueled texts I'd sent to Dane. I'd been feeling desperate and alone, and I'd reached out to him one more time. He'd screenshot our conversation and sent it to Simon. "He betrayed me," I whispered. "No, Eluned, he did what he should have done months ago. He told the truth." "Simon, please. Those messages don't mean anything. I was drunk and upset. They mean everything. They mean that even when you're backed into a corner, even when your marriage and your family are on the line, you still can't stop lying." I felt panic rising in my chest. "What about Mila? You can't break up our family over this." "I'm not breaking up our family. You did that when you decided your own happiness was more important than your marriage vows." Simon pulled out another set of papers. "These are custody arrangements. I'm asking for primary custody, with you getting supervised visitation until you can prove you're stable." "Supervised visitation? Simon, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. Our daughter has been asking why you seem so sad and angry all the time. She's been having nightmares. Her teacher called to say she's been acting out at school. Your choices have consequences, Eluned, and one of those consequences is that I won't let you damage our child." "I would never hurt Mila. You already have. Every time you chose to meet with Dane instead of spending time with her. Every time you started a fight with me in front of her. Every time you made our home a place of tension and conflict." I looked at the divorce papers again, trying to process what was happening. "What about the house? What about my job?" "The house will probably have to be sold. As for your job, that's between you and Jennifer, though I understand there have been some concerns about your professional conduct lately." "How do you know about that?" "Because Mike from accounting is a friend of mine. He was worried about you after that happy hour incident. He thought I should know what you were telling people." The room felt like it was spinning. "You've been investigating me." "I've been protecting myself and our daughter. There's a difference." Simon stood up and gathered his papers. You have 30 days to respond to the divorce petition. I'd recommend getting a lawyer. Simon, wait, please. I know I made mistakes, but this is extreme. We can work through this. He paused at the door and looked back at me. You know what the saddest part is? If you had just apologized to my parents after the birthday dinner, if you had been honest with me about your feelings instead of sneaking around with another man, we probably could have worked through this. But you chose to double down on every bad decision. And now it's too late. It's not too late. We can start over. No, Eluned, we can't, because I don't trust you anymore, and I don't think you're capable of the kind of change this would require. You're still blaming everyone else for your choices, still looking for ways to avoid taking responsibility. That's not true, isn't it? Even now, you're not apologizing for what you did. You're just upset that you got caught. With that, he walked out, leaving me alone with the divorce papers and the wreckage of my marriage. I spent the next hour calling everyone I could think of, Tessa, my mother, even Rachel from work. But no one seemed surprised by Simon's decision. Even my mother, who had always taken my side in everything, seemed subdued. Maybe this is for the best, honey, she said finally. Maybe you both need a fresh start. Mom, he's taking Mila away from me. He's not taking her away. He's making sure she's in a stable environment while you figure things out. Whose side are you on? I'm on your side, always. But I'm also thinking about my granddaughter. She needs peace and stability, not parents who are constantly fighting. After I hung up, I sat in my empty house and finally allowed myself to cry. Not the manipulative tears I'd used so many times to get my way, but real, honest grief for what I'd lost and what I'd thrown away. The next morning, I woke up to a knock at my door. It was a process server with official copies of Simon's divorce filing. As I signed for the papers, I saw Mrs. Henderson from down the street watching from her yard, and I realized that soon everyone in town would know about my public humiliation. But as I closed the door and looked at the legal documents in my hands, I realized something that surprised me. I felt relieved. For months, I'd been living a lie, pretending to be happy in my marriage while pursuing something else entirely. Now, at least, everything was out in the open. I still had to face the consequences, the custody battle, the financial uncertainty, the social embarrassment. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't. Simon had called my bluff, and he'd won. The joke was definitely on me.